Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Creepy. In tonight's video, we dive into 8 most disturbing true December horror stories. Chilling encounters from the darkest, coldest nights of the year, when the world goes quiet and something else begins to move. From figures standing frozen in blizzards without leaving footprints, to midnight knocks on doors when the roads are buried in snow, these stories show what happens when December's cold isn't just weather, it's alive. Breaths forming on windows from the inside, silhouettes wandering through storms no person could survive, voices calling from frozen lakes that no longer exist, and shapes watching from tree lines long after the wind has stopped. These winter accounts reveal the horrors people witnessed during the dead of winter, moments so cold, so silent that something took advantage of it. If you're new here, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new true horror stories. Now get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's begin. I live on a long dead-end road in northern Vermont, the kind of place where the forest presses in so tightly you forget what sunlight feels like by late afternoon. In December, the world becomes a tunnel of white and silence. Snow muffles everything. Footsteps, voices, even your own thoughts. I work from home, so I'm used to the winter quiet, but last December, something changed that silence in a way I still can't fully understand. It started with a noise that shouldn't have been there at all. A snowplow engine. At 2 in the morning. The first time I heard it, I assumed I was imagining things. Maybe a neighbor had hired a private plow. Maybe the town changed their route. Maybe I didn't actually hear it. I had been half asleep after all, drifting in and out as the wind combed through the pines outside my bedroom window. But the second time I was fully awake. It was December 8th. The clock read 2:04 a.m. I sat up to use the bathroom when I heard it again. That deep diesel rumble, slow and steady, the grinding drag of a plow blade scraping the asphalt. The sound echoed strangely down the narrow valley my road sits in, bouncing between the trees like something alive. I pulled aside my curtain. Headlights creeped slowly past my house. Not bright white LED lights, but dull yellowish bulbs. The old kind they used before the town upgraded its fleet. And attached to them was a large orange plow truck, moving at a near crawl, pushing an almost non-existent layer of snow off the road. We'd only gotten a dusting that night, not enough to justify plowing anything. But the truck moved methodically, like it had a job to do, and no intention of stopping until it was done. It continued down the road toward the dead end, its taillights flickering as it turned. I waited to see if it would come back. It didn't. The next morning, I walked down the driveway to check the mailbox. That's when I noticed something strange. My entire driveway had been cleared perfectly, down to bare pavement. Not the half-hearted strip most plows leave. I'm talking every inch, even the small curve near my garage that is almost impossible for larger trucks to maneuver. I hadn't hired anyone, and the town definitely wouldn't plow individual driveways. I stood there for a long time, breath fogging in the cold, staring at the clean black strip cutting through the snow. Something felt wrong. I can't explain it. It was just a weight in my gut, like I had slept through something important. Still, I tried to brush it off. Winter paranoia is a thing up here. When the sun sets at 4 p.m. and you don't speak to another person for days, you start imagining things. But the plowing didn't stop. It kept happening. Every night. Always between 1:45 and 2:20 a.m. I'd hear the low rumble start at the end of the road, then the slow crawl past my house, then the fading engine as it left. No one else mentioned it. My road had only 6 houses, and most were seasonal. In winter, it was just me, an elderly couple half a mile up, and a guy named Dale who worked night shifts. Maybe that's why no one complained. But I noticed something new. Every night, the plow got slower. At first, it passed normally, at maybe 15 miles per hour. But by December 15th, it was moving at walking speed. By December 20th, it barely seemed to move at all, like it was creeping past my house on purpose, like it wanted to stop. I told myself I was overthinking it. But then I saw the driver. It was December 22nd, a night so cold the air felt like shattered glass, the kind where frost creeps up inside your windows. I couldn't sleep, so I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through my phone when the rumble started. right on time. This time, I decided I needed to see it up close. Make sure my mind wasn't filling in details that weren't really there. Maybe it was just an older truck. Maybe the town had hired contractors. Maybe I'd see a normal driver, wave, and go back to bed laughing at myself. So I grabbed my coat, stepped onto the porch, and quietly closed the door behind me. The sound grew closer. The headlights appeared over the small rise in front of my house. Yellow, dim, flickering at the edges like a dying bulb. The plow crawled toward me at what couldn't have been more than 3 miles per hour. I raised my hand to wave. That's when I realized I couldn't see the driver's face. Not because it was dark, the cab light was on, but the seat was empty. My breath froze in my chest. I blinked hard, thinking maybe the angle was wrong or I was seeing reflections. But no, the truck was driving itself. The wheel moved on its own, making micro adjustments as the blade swept the thin layer of powder off the pavement. It crawled directly in front of me, passing maybe 10 feet away, giving me a perfect view of the windshield. Completely empty. No driver. Yet the engine was running. The wheels were turning. The plow blade shifted as if controlled by an invisible hand. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The truck didn't stop, didn't speed up, it just continued past my house, creeping toward the dead end. I watched until it disappeared around the bend. Then I went inside and locked every door, every window, every latch. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I drove to the town garage. I needed answers. The foreman, a man in his 60s named Ron, listened quietly as I described the truck, the headlights, the slow speed, the route, even the exact paint color. When I finished, he rubbed his temples and looked away. "Was it truck number 17? He asked softly. I had no idea. I hadn't seen the number. He sighed heavily. That truck hasn't been in service since 2009. How is that possible? I asked. I saw it last night. It plowed my driveway. He shook his head. Son, that truck crashed 14 years ago. Driver died, hypothermia. They found him slumped over the wheel at the end of your road. My stomach dropped. Where exactly? He hesitated. Right at the dead end. I couldn't speak. My mouth felt full of ice. We salvaged the tires and scrapped the rest, he said. There's no truck number 17 anymore. Hasn't been for years. I left feeling half sick, half convinced something had been playing with me. Maybe I'd been seeing things. Maybe someone restored an old truck. Maybe that night ended those theories. December 23rd, 1:57 a.m., the plow came again. But this time it stopped directly in front of my house. The engine idled loudly. Lights flickered, casting weak yellow sweeps across my yard. I sat by the window, staring through a haze of frost. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep my face close to the glass. The driver's side door creaked open slowly. A freezing wind swept through the open cab. Then something stepped out. Not a person. At least not anymore. It was a man-shaped figure, but wrong. Hunched, frostbitten, covered in a hard shell of ice that cracked with every movement. Frost clung to him like a second skin. His eyes were black pits, his mouth a frozen line that looked torn rather than opened. He walked toward my house with stiff, disjointed movements, leaving no footprints in the snow. I backed away from the window so fast I hit the wall. A knock sounded on my door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I didn't move. After a long silence, I heard him walk away, that same brittle, crackling sound, and climb back into the truck. The door shut. The plow idled for another 30 seconds, then crawled away. I lay on the floor, heart slamming, listening until the sound faded into the forest. On Christmas Eve, I left Vermont and didn't go back for 2 weeks. When I finally returned, the driveway was still perfectly cleared, even though no plow had come for days. I installed cameras after that. But here's the part that still keeps me up. Every December, between the 1st and the 23rd, the cameras always lose signal between 2 and 2:10 a.m. And every morning, the driveway is plowed clean. I never see the truck. I never hear the engine. But I know it's there, and I know the driver still doesn't realize he's dead. I've always been the kind of person who overdoes Christmas decorations. Some people bake cookies or host parties or send cards. Me, I'm the guy who covers the entire yard in lights, enough to make the electric company smile every December. My display isn't one of those cheap setups either. I've spent years building it. Handmade wireframes, synchronized lights, custom wood cutouts. even a small walk-through path for neighborhood kids. It's my winter passion project, the thing that keeps me sane when the days get short and the cold sinks into everything. But last year, December 12th to be exact, something started visiting the display late at night. Something that shouldn't have been there. And honestly, something I don't believe was human. That evening had been normal enough. I just finished repairing a loose strand running along the arches leading into the walk-through lane, a narrow path lined with candy cane poles and soft white lights. When I went inside, it was around 9:30 p.m. The forecast called for a clear, cold night with no new snowfall, perfect for the display. Around midnight, I looked out of habit from the living room window to make sure all the lights were still running. That's when I noticed something immediately wrong. The sensor lights in the yard, the ones that only turn on when something moves inside the display, were glowing bright white. That only happens when someone is physically walking inside the layout. At first, I assumed it was a rabbit or a fox, or maybe even a deer. But the sensor placement is low to the ground, and the lights only turn on if something passes through the path itself, not the edges. I slipped my coat on and stepped outside. The air was freezing enough to sting my teeth, a sharp, brittle cold that wasn't normal for mid-December. My breath fogged instantly as I walked down the porch steps. The yard was silent. No animals, no people, just lights blinking gently to the rhythm of the music loop I had set to a speaker near the garage. I walked toward the path, and then I saw it, a single perfectly clear footprint in the snow. Not a shoe print, a bare footprint. Even worse, it was pointed toward my house. I stared at it for almost a full minute, trying to convince myself I was seeing it wrong. No one would be barefoot in 12-degree weather. No one would walk through a Christmas display privately owned by a stranger. And definitely no one would tiptoe so quietly that I didn't hear them. I walked the entire layout looking for more prints. There were none, just one. One perfect footprint that hadn't been there earlier. I went back inside, told myself it must have been some strange melting pattern, and tried to sleep. I didn't. This time I checked the display around 11 p.m. before bed. Everything looked normal. But around 2:14 a.m., my dog Teddy started growling at the front window. Not barking, growling. Deep, steady, unbroken. I'd owned him long enough to know he didn't growl for nothing. I walked over and parted the curtain. The motion lights were on again, but this time I saw movement. A figure, tall, thin, slow, walking between the lit reindeer and the candy cane poles. Not fast, not sneaking, not trying to hide. Just walking. The lights illuminated in flashes, depending on where it stepped. Sometimes its shoulders, sometimes its legs, sometimes just a brief outline. But it moved with a strange stiffness, like someone trying to remember how to use their limbs. I froze. Teddy pressed against my leg, trembling. The figure paused next to the wire snowman, staring up at it. The snowman glowed blue and white, casting a soft circular light. For 1 second, the figure stepped fully into that light. I saw it clearly. A man, maybe, or something shaped like one. Very tall, barefoot, wearing a thin, torn shirt that fluttered in the wind like it was made of paper. Skin pale and stretched, like someone who'd been cold for a very long time. Its arms hung too low, fingertips brushing the snow. Then it turned its head toward my house. I dropped the curtain. I didn't breathe for almost 10 seconds. I waited another minute before looking again. When I did, the figure was gone, completely vanished. The only thing left was a trail of bare footprints weaving through the display. I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. They checked the yard, took a report, and told me it was likely a trespasser or someone homeless looking for warmth. But those footprints tracked in perfect lines, never wandering, never hesitating, and they all ended in the exact same place, facing my front porch. By the third night, I had become obsessed. I installed 2 motion-activated cameras. I mounted one on the porch and another on the garage. I even left my living room lamp off so I could see clearly into the yard. I was determined not to be caught off guard again. But nothing prepares you for hearing footsteps in your yard when you know no one should be outside. It was around 1:50 a.m. when they started. Light, slow crunches, spaced out evenly, the way someone walks when they're scanning their surroundings. I peeked from behind the curtain. The figure was back, but this time it wasn't roaming. It was standing directly in the center of the walkway, staring in my direction. The lights danced around its silhouette, revealing pieces of its face, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, lips cracked from cold. I realized its eyes were open unnaturally wide, as if frozen that way. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed. Nothing. Both cameras were black, off, but the porch light worked. The sensors worked, the display lights worked, just the cameras were dead. I turned back to the window. The figure had moved. It was now standing at the edge of the walkway, next to the wire archway entrance, the one closest to the porch, 5 feet closer to my house. I leaned back slowly, careful not to let the window creak. Another sound followed, the soft whine of something brushing against plastic. I dared to look again. The figure had stepped through the pathway arch, 10 feet closer, its breath fogged in a long, slow exhale. I could see one of its hands dragging along the candy cane pole, leaving a streak. Not blood, something darker, almost like melted frost or soot. I stepped away from the window and backed into the hallway. Teddy pressed against me, whining now. The figure moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, one step every 2 or 3 seconds. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. I looked down the hall. I realized with a sinking, sickening feeling that I had left the front door unlocked. I heard the steps reach my porch. Then, nothing. Silence. Long, unbearable silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Even Teddy froze. Then, tap. A single soft tap against the doorbell. Not a press, a tap. I clenched my jaw and waited. Another tap. Slightly harder. Then a slow dragging sound, as if someone or something was running a fingertip along the wood of the door, tracing the outline. Then quiet again. The footsteps left, a few slow crunches heading down the driveway. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The trail of bare footprints started at the road, came up the driveway, weaved through the display, and ended at my porch. Facing the door, no return footprints, just the approach, as if whatever it was simply vanished once it reached the house. I checked the cameras. Both had frozen at exactly 1:52 a.m. The files were corrupted. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Whatever was visiting my display didn't want to be seen on film. By December 16th, I had already decided to take the display down. Something in me felt wrong every time I walked near it. A pressure in the air, like someone watching from behind the reindeer or from the shadows behind the plywood Santa. But my wife convinced me to leave it up for the kids. "It's just a trespasser," she said. "Maybe someone mentally unstable, but it's not supernatural." I didn't argue, but I slept on the couch again that night, facing the display. At 2:03 a.m., I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate. I sat up, heart pounding. The figure walked into view immediately, no wandering this time, no hesitation. It moved straight to the center of the yard, turned toward me and stood completely still. Then it tilted its head slowly to the right, then to the left, as if studying me, as if deciding something. For the first time, I saw its mouth move. It opened, cracked, frost-bitten lips parting, but no sound came out. Just a long stretch of motion like the shape of speech without a voice. Then it pointed at the house, not accusingly, not threateningly, more like it wanted to come inside. I staggered back and bumped into the couch. When I looked again, it had taken 3 steps forward, then another and another. It crossed half the distance to the porch in less than 20 seconds. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I didn't call 911. I didn't think they'd believe me. Instead, I turned on every exterior light at once. Bright white floodlights around the garage, porch, driveway, backyard. All of them. The yard exploded with light, and the figure was gone. Just gone. No running, no sound, no footprints showing it turned. It disappeared mid-step. Only one bare footprint remained where the last step had landed. The final night. I barely slept the entire day. By dusk, something strange had happened. The entire display felt drained, dimmer, weaker. Some of the lights flickered, even though the wiring was perfect. I stood out there at 8 p.m., breath fogging, staring at the ornaments and props I had spent years building. Everything felt wrong, like I had built a shrine for something I didn't understand. At 1:57 a.m., the footsteps returned, but they didn't start at the road. They started directly under the window, a single step, then another, then another. I froze. The figure wasn't at the display, it was at the house, right below me. I leaned slowly to the window and looked down. The figure was staring up at me, its eyes wide, black, empty, locked onto mine instantly. It didn't move. Neither did I. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. Then, without breaking eye contact, it placed one hand gently on the siding of the house, not clawing, not scratching, just resting its hand there. Then it opened its mouth again, lips cracking wider than before. Not speech, not a voice, a sound like frozen air being dragged between teeth. Then it turned and walked into the display. Lights flickered violently as it passed. They went dark completely as it reached the center. A wind swept through the yard, hard enough to shake the candy cane poles. Then everything went still. The figure was gone, and every light in the display shorted out at once. Every bulb, every decoration, every archway. The candy cane poles were ice cold to the touch, like they'd been left in a freezer overnight. The snowman's face, normally smooth, had deep cracks down the center, as if something had gripped it hard. The cameras showed nothing, not even corrupted files, just black. The only proof I have left is a single footprint, photographed before the sun melted it. But I don't need evidence, because every night since then, even now, I hear footsteps outside around 2 a.m. Not on the display path, because the display is gone. They walk around the house instead. Every night, circling slowly, never running, never knocking, just walking, barefoot. And every December 12th, when I first saw that footprint, the footsteps get a little louder, a little closer. I know it's coming back, and next time it won't just be looking at the decorations. I grew up in a small New England town where December feels less like a month and more like a season of its own. Frost coats the windows every morning, chimneys breathe constantly, and the sky goes dark before most people even leave work. One of the few things that kept the town feeling alive during those bitter days was the annual caroler night. Groups of families, teenagers, kids from school, they all walked through the streets singing old Christmas hymns. It was charming in a way that made you forget how cold your bones were. Last year, though, something changed. Something that I still don't fully understand, even though I heard it with my own ears and saw the effects with my own eyes. It started on December 10th at exactly 3:13 a.m. I woke up to singing. I don't mean music from a passing car or someone playing a late-night playlist. I mean full-throated singing, clear, perfectly tuned, echoing faintly through the street outside. The kind of singing that makes the hair on your arms rise before your brain even processes it. I lay there for several seconds, confused and half asleep, listening as the voice moved closer. It was a man's voice, old-fashioned in its tone, the kind that belonged to someone trained in choir decades ago. He sang "O Holy Night," slow and deliberate. But there was something off about the voice, not in pitch, but in the way it lingered, like it was coming through an old radio with perfect clarity, no static, no distortion, no breath between lines. At first I thought it was a neighbor. Maybe someone couldn't sleep and decided to walk the block. But the more I listened, the colder I felt. The song didn't sound like a human voice carried by air. It sounded like a recording, but one happening live, right outside my house. I got up and went to the window. The street was empty. The singing continued, moving past my house as if the singer were walking slowly in the center of the road. The voice grew quieter, fading into the distance, and then abruptly stopped, cut off mid-note, like someone had unplugged a speaker. I stood at the window for several minutes, staring into the stillness. There was no movement, no footprints in the thin layer of snow, no sign of anyone at all. I went back to bed eventually, telling myself maybe I'd imagined part of it. Hypnagogic hallucinations, weird winter dreams. Anything was more logical than an invisible caroler walking alone through the neighborhood at 3 a.m. The next day, however, I heard something that made my stomach sink. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Albright, told me she'd heard the singing too. She said it woke her up in the same way, abruptly and without explanation. But when she looked out the window, she also saw no one. Her eyes darted toward the street when she spoke about it, as if expecting something to be standing there even in daylight. Over the next 2 nights, more neighbors admitted they heard it as well. Always around 3:10 to 3:20 a.m., always the same voice, the same song, always passing down the same stretch of road. It became clear this wasn't a coincidence. Someone or something was caroling in the dead of night. On December 14th, the voice changed songs. Instead of "O Holy Night," it began singing "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." The way it sang the lyrics made my skin crawl. The words were pronounced too crisply, the pacing too controlled. Each syllable landed with unnatural precision. I don't know how else to describe it, except that it felt rehearsed beyond any human performance. That night, I made a decision that in hindsight feels stupid, but at the time felt necessary. I was going to see the singer up close. I set an alarm for 3 a.m. and sat by the living room window with the lights off, wrapped in a blanket, drinking lukewarm coffee. My street was silent, coated in a fresh layer of snow from the storm earlier that evening. At exactly 3:11 a.m., the singing began. Soft at first, drifting from the far end of the street. I held my breath as it grew louder. The voice approached steadily, each step of the unseen singer perfectly matched with the rhythm of the hymn. My heart pounded so violently I felt it in my throat. The song grew louder, closer. Then, through the curtain, I saw movement. A shadow stretching across the snow. It wasn't a full silhouette, just the faint outline of something tall passing beneath the street lamps. The shadow didn't match a human shape. The head was too elongated, the shoulders too narrow, and the shadow itself flickered slightly, as if the source casting it didn't quite belong to the same world as the snow it darkened. Still, the singing never wavered. I moved closer to the window, keeping low. My hands trembled as I parted the curtain by a fraction of an inch. Nothing. The street was completely empty. But the shadow was still moving, slowly drifting past the snowdrifts, sliding across the mailbox, crawling over the pavement, as if whatever was casting it was invisible in the light. I shut the curtain, not slammed, shut, quietly and carefully. I crawled away from the window and sat against the far wall, heart hammering. The singing passed the house, and as it faded, I heard something for the first time, a second voice, quieter, echoing faintly behind the first, like a harmonic whisper trying to keep up. That night I didn't sleep. I waited until dawn, when the sky finally brightened enough to feel safe again. That morning I walked outside to inspect the yard. I found footprints, bare footprints, but not human ones. Each print was long, narrow, and deep, far deeper than any lightweight creature could have made. And there was no stride spacing. Each print was placed almost directly in front of the last, in a perfect line, as if whatever made them walked with an unnatural precision. I followed them down the street until they abruptly vanished in the middle of the road. No drift, no melting, no interruption in the snow pattern. Just there one moment, gone the next. The town had a history, one I didn't know fully until that week. After asking around, especially the older residents, I learned that decades ago, a beloved local choir singer named Matthew Hale disappeared on Christmas Eve. He had been the lead caroler every year. But one night, after finishing the town rounds, he walked home alone and never arrived. They found his music sheet book lying open on the sidewalk 2 blocks from where he lived. No footprints surrounded it, no evidence of violence, no trace of him was ever found. But people whispered that his voice never left. One woman told me she heard him the winter after he vanished. She said she woke to singing in the middle of the night, clean, beautiful hymns drifting through the town streets. The year after that, another family claimed the same. But then it stopped, or so people thought. Hearing this made the nightly singing feel different. Not comforting, not tragic, but purposeful, as if someone was searching. December 17th was the night everything escalated. I woke without the alarm at 2:58 a.m., my body tense and alert. Something felt wrong in the air, heavy, charged, like the moment before lightning. Teddy, the neighbor's dog, began barking uncontrollably. He never barked at the nightly singing before. When the singing began at 3:12, it wasn't just one voice. There were 2, both singing the same hymn but slightly out of sync. The second voice carried a rasp, like frost breaking between the notes. They moved down the street slower than before, too slow to be natural. I peeked through the side curtain and saw 2 shadows now, long, stretched, almost skeletal in shape. They drifted together, merging and separating as they moved. My breath fogged the glass. Then the singing stopped mid-word. The shadows stopped, and slowly, both turned toward my house. The air felt like it dropped 10 degrees instantly. The voices began singing again, but now directly facing my home. The sound vibrated through the siding, through the windows, through my bones. It felt too close, like they were inside the walls and outside at the same time. I stepped back from the window. The shadows moved closer to the house, and without warning, every light in the neighborhood went out. Street lamps, porch lights, Christmas decorations, everything. The voices kept singing. I stumbled backward in the dark until I reached the hallway. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Then something tapped on the front door. Not knocking, tapping, rhythmically, like someone practicing a beat for a song. I didn't move. The tapping continued for a full minute, then stopped. The singing faded again, moving away from the house. When the lights flickered back on a moment later, I ran to the window. The street was empty, no shadows, no singers, but there were footprints leading to my porch. Dozens of them. That same elongated shape, packed tightly together like whoever was standing there shifted from side to side for several minutes while singing. I called the police after sunrise. They investigated, found nothing, and told me snow deforms prints. But I know what I saw. The singing continued nightly until December 23rd. Then it stopped completely, not gradually. Silence, absolute and total, until last week. At 3:12 a.m., a single voice started singing again. Not down the street, but right outside my bedroom window. And this time it sang my name between the verses. I rented the cabin because I wanted silence. That's what I kept telling myself each time I hesitated while booking it. The silence would be good for me. After the breakup, after losing my job, after the months of feeling like I was moving underwater, the idea of disappearing into the mountains for a week seemed like the one thing I hadn't ruined yet. The listing described it as an isolated winter retreat tucked deep in the pines with no neighbors and no distractions. I paid without thinking twice. My first day there felt exactly like what I had hoped for. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that burns your lungs just enough to remind you you're alive. The cabin creaked like any old structure in winter, but it felt sturdy, warm, and safe. The wood stove filled the place with a soft orange glow, and the snowfall outside muted every distant sound. I made a cup of cocoa, sat on the couch with a blanket, and convinced myself I'd made a good choice. But that night, something strange happened. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up freezing. Not cold, freezing. The air inside the cabin felt wrong, heavy, damp, like the temperature had dropped 30 degrees in seconds. I sat up, groggy and shivering, and noticed the windows. Every single one was frosted over. Thick white frost coated the glass from the inside, not the outside. Patterns of ice crystals sprawled across the panes, branching into spirals that looked almost deliberate. I walked over to the nearest window and touched it. My fingertips stuck to the glass. The cold bit into my skin like metal in deep winter. I yanked my hand back, shaking it, my breath fogging violently in the air. I checked the thermostat. It read 27 degrees inside. The wood stove had gone out. I didn't understand how. I had loaded it before bed, packed tightly, enough for 6 hours. I crouched in front of it and saw the logs. Not burned out, not ashy, not consumed. They were frozen. A layer of frost covered the wood, like someone had taken them from a walk-in freezer and placed them inside the stove. Even the metal was covered in a thin, shimmering glaze. My stomach tightened. I lit new fire starter and tried to get a flame going, but the moment the sparks touched the logs, the fire stuttered and died. The flame wasn't smothered, it was swallowed, like the cold was alive and hungry. I stepped away slowly. The cabin groaned as if shifting under the weight of snow, though I knew it wasn't snow causing that sound. Something about the darkness beyond the frosted windows felt unnatural. I turned every light on, wrapped myself in blankets, and sat awake until morning. By daylight, the frost had melted. Every surface was dripping with condensation, puddles forming under the windows. The stove wood was wet but no longer frozen. The thermostat returned to normal. I convinced myself it must have been some sort of ventilation issue, a malfunction, a pressure change, anything except what it felt like, a presence. The second night proved that wasn't the case. I had tried to enjoy my day, took a short hike, made a simple dinner, watched a movie downloaded on my laptop. By 11, I was tired enough that my body screamed for sleep. I crawled under the thick cabin quilt and closed my eyes. At 1:48 a.m., I woke up again, freezing. And the windows, frosted again, but this time the frost was different. It formed shapes, hundreds of overlapping circles etched into the ice, each one about the size of a fist. They layered over each other like prints, not fingerprints, not palm prints, breath marks, as if dozens of people had leaned close to the windows and exhaled warm air, only for the cold to instantly freeze the fog into perfect circles. I approached slowly. When I got close, I realized some circles were higher than others, some low, some near the very top of the window, different heights, different breaths, different faces. A sound came from the other side of the window, a long, slow inhale, not a gust of wind, not an animal, a breath. My legs almost gave out. I backed away until I hit the opposite wall. Blanket dragged behind me. I didn't dare go near the windows again. The breath exhaled next. The frost thickened. The glass cracked along the edges. I stayed like that all night, pressed against the wall, eyes burned from not blinking, waiting for something to shatter the silence. But the glass held. The breathing eventually stopped. Morning finally arrived. This time something new was left behind on the windowsills. Water pooled thickly, as if something warm had been pressed against the glass for hours before melting away with the dawn. On the third day, I told myself I was leaving. I didn't care about the remaining nights I'd paid for. I just wanted to go home. But a storm moved in early, thick, heavy snow that swallowed the dirt road leading to the cabin. My car's tires spun uselessly in the drifts. The road was impassable. I was trapped. I spent the rest of the day trying not to think about the night coming. I laid towels under the windows to catch the melting frost. I kept every light on. I loaded the stove with wood but didn't light it. I didn't want to see the logs freeze again. By sundown, dread crawled under my skin. The quiet before the third night felt different, thick, expectant. The temperature dropped steadily, even though no cold drafts came through. The air simply changed. Around 1:40 a.m., the first sound arrived, a soft tapping on the window. Not from fingers, not from nails, from knuckles. 3 taps, then silence. 3 taps again. I clutched the blanket so hard my knuckles bent backwards. My heart beat so violently I could hear it in my ears. A 4th tap. Harder this time. Then something dragged across the window, slow, scraping, deliberate. The frost thickened instantly in the shape of a long smear. Then breath fogged the glass again. The whole window clouded white. But the most horrifying part wasn't the breath. It was the outline of something behind it. A face, an elongated, distorted face pressed hard enough against the glass that the frost stretched in the shape of cheekbones and a long jaw. 2 dark shapes where eyes should be stared straight into the cabin. Then another face appeared beside it, and another, and another. Shapes forming in the frost, dozens of them, like a crowd of people huddled outside the cabin, staring in through the windows. Their breath glazed the glass. Their outlines moved slightly each time they inhaled. I couldn't move, my throat locked. I wanted to run to the bathroom, hide in the bathtub, anything, but terror nailed me in place. The faces pressed closer. Frost cracked and spread across the center of the window. Something pushed at the glass from the outside. The wood frame creaked. Then, the breathing stopped. Every face vanished instantly. All that remained was frost slowly melting. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I kept my eyes on the window until the sun finally rose. The 4th day was different. I felt sick, exhausted, like someone had drained all the heat from my bones. Even wrapped in layers, I couldn't warm up. The air inside the cabin felt colder than outside. I checked the wood stove. The logs I had stacked the day before were frosted over again. Thick ice clung to their bark, and water pooled beneath them like they had thawed at some point, only to refreeze again. I didn't touch them. That afternoon, I tried the car again. The engine turned once, then died. The battery was dead, or frozen, or both. I opened the hood. Frost coated the entire engine block in spiderweb patterns. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat on the couch facing the windows, blanket wrapped tightly around me, listening, waiting. My breath fogged in the air even though the thermostat should have kept the cabin warm. The windows frosted slowly over the hours, but no breath marks appeared this time. No tapping, no scraping, just growing ice. Around 3 a.m., something changed. The frost on the bedroom window cracked loudly, like a gunshot muffled by snow. I jumped. Another crack, this time on the kitchen window, then another, and another. a chorus of splintering frost like something was pressing gently against every pane of glass in the cabin. And then the breathing started again, but not from outside, from inside the walls. Long, cold breaths slipping through the seams of the wood. I heard them between the planks, under the floorboards, from the tiny gap behind the stove. The breaths filled the room, icy air that slid around my ankles first, then my knees, then my chest. My breath mingled with theirs, turning the air into a haze of fog. Something moved behind the bedroom door, a soft thump, then another, and then a long, dragging sound, like something heavy was being pulled across the floor. The frost on the bedroom window thickened from inside. My body locked in place. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I go? Into the storm? Into the woods? Into whatever waited for me outside? The dragging sound grew closer. The door handle twisted. Slowly, too slowly to be human. It clicked once, twice, then stopped. Silence filled the cabin for nearly a full minute. Then the windows all shattered inward at once. A blast of cold exploded into the cabin, thick enough to suck the air from my lungs. The shards of glass didn't scatter. They fell in straight, perfect lines, like the cold was holding them in formations before dropping them neatly onto the floor. Snow blew inside in a swirling rush, but no wind accompanied it. The fractured frost swirled across the floor in a pale haze, gathering into shapes, faces, dozens of them, forming out of mist, drifting across the room, leaning close to me as I pressed myself into the corner. Their breath touched my cheeks, my forehead, the back of my neck, cold enough to burn. One shape leaned closer. Its breath froze the tears on my face instantly. A sound escaped it, not a word, not a voice, a sigh. Then the shapes dissolved. Every window went silent again. The frost melted, the temperature rose as if nothing had happened. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and ran to the car. It started on the second try. The snow on the road had softened enough for me to plow through it. I didn't look back once. I don't know what was in that cabin. I don't know if it was the cold itself, or something born from it, or something that lived inside the walls long before the structure was built. All I know is this: when I got home and unpacked my suitcase, a single sheet of frost was stuck to one of my shirts. Perfectly smooth, perfectly shaped, in the outline of a hand. The night it started, I was working the late dispatch shift, December 18th, a quiet Tuesday, the kind where the phones barely ring and the clock seems frozen. I had logged almost 10 hours already, drinking stale coffee that tasted like metal and trying to stay awake while listening to the radio chatter from the patrol cars. Every so often, I'd get a call about a lost dog or a minor fender bender on the ice, but nothing major. Winter nights were slow. Around 2:21 a.m., the call came in. I remember the exact time because the monitor flickered slightly when it happened, a glitch that never occurs on our system. A number flashed across the screen. Unknown caller, no location data. For dispatchers, that's extremely rare. Even blocked or private numbers still show a coordinating tower. This had nothing, just a blank space. I hesitated, then answered. 911, what's your emergency? What came through wasn't a voice. It was a long, shaking breath, wet, ragged, painful. Not like someone scared or crying, more like freezing. I straightened in my chair. Hello? Can you hear me? Another breath, colder, sharper. I swear I could feel the temperature drop around me just listening to it. Then a whisper finally pushed through the static. Help me. The words were thin, stretched, trembling as though the speaker was struggling to move their lips at all. Sir, are you injured? Tell me where you are. There was a faint crackling sound, wind maybe, and then the whisper again. Please, it's cold. My eyes flicked to the screen again, still no coordinates, still no data. Sir, I need you to tell me what you see. Are you inside, outside, in a vehicle? There was a rattling gasp, then water. The word came out strangled, then a cough. A horrible, choking sound. Are you in water? Silence. Then another breath, this time with a wet gurgle underneath it. Frozen, water. Something snapped inside me. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Sir, listen to me. Are you on a lake? Did you fall through ice? A faint whimper answered me, a pitiful, terrified sound. Yes. That one word chilled me. People fall through ice sometimes, but rarely at 2 in the morning, and never without calling from a real phone with a real signal. Stay calm. Don't move more than you have to. It can make you sink faster. Are you alone? Please help. Tell me which lake you're on." There were dozens in our region. Some were small ponds, some were large reservoirs. If he didn't tell me, he'd be dead long before help found him. I heard scraping on the line, metal on ice maybe, and the voice strained. "It's dark." I tried again. "Look around. Do you see lights, houses, a shoreline?" His answer was a whisper so faint I barely caught it. None of this was here. That made no sense. "What do you mean?" He inhaled sharply, like something brushed against him. "The lake, this lake, I knew it. It wasn't here." Panic tightened his voice, as if he had just realized something truly awful. "It shouldn't be here." My hands went cold. "Sir, stay with me. Focus on your breathing." He cried then, quiet, desperate sobs muffled by freezing water. "Please, I can't. Hold on." I flagged the call to my supervisor, signaling an active emergency with no location. He looked at my monitor, confused. "Try again," he mouthed, tapping the signal icon. I did. "Tell me your name." No answer. "Sir, stay awake. Tell me your name." Finally, he whispered, "Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to find you, but I need you to listen closely. Tell me the last place you remember being before this happened." A long pause, then broken, driving. "Okay, what road?" His voice cracked. "Old Birch Road." My stomach tightened. Old Birch Road ran near a lake, but that lake didn't freeze solid. It was deep, moving water fed by a year-round stream. People fished there in summer, but it never froze enough to walk on. The dispatcher next to me must have overheard because she turned, eyes wide. Old Birch Lake was 24 feet deep in the shallows alone. No one could fall through ice that shouldn't exist. "Anthony, listen to me. Are you sure you're on Old Birch Lake?" Another sob. It wasn't a lake before. It was a road. A road? My skin crawled. "Anthony, where did you park your vehicle?" A horrible, choking cry burst through the line. "It's under the ice." My mouth went dry. I felt a wave of nausea. Before I could ask more, a new sound flooded the line. Loud, violent cracking. Ice tearing apart. "Anthony, stay still," he screamed. A sound so raw, so full of agony that everyone in the dispatch room froze. Even the radios went silent. Then, abruptly, the scream cut out. All that remained was that same cold, shaky breathing. Then a whisper that didn't sound like him anymore. "Too cold," and the line disconnected. I sat frozen, staring at the monitor. The call timer read exactly 3 minutes, but the call log showed something strange. Call date, December 18th, 1998. Caller status, deceased. I rubbed my eyes so hard they burned. That had to be a glitch, some system error. The last time dispatch updated its software was in the early 2000s. It wasn't impossible, but my supervisor saw it too. "That's not right," he whispered. We pulled up the archived records manually. Twice, 3 times. Same result. According to the system, the last person to call from that number, 27 years ago, was Anthony Wilkes, who had drowned after driving into a frozen lake during a freak winter storm. A frozen lake that existed only because that storm had created a massive ice overflow, submerging part of Old Birch Road beneath a flash freeze. A lake that had disappeared days later when rescue teams broke through the ice to recover the bodies. The road hasn't flooded since. The lake hasn't existed since. And Anthony had died long before I ever heard his voice. We sat there, stunned, replaying the audio. The timestamp still insisted it was from December 18th, 1998, but the sound quality was modern, crystal clear, as if the call wasn't old, as if it happened in real time. But the true horror wasn't the timestamp, it was what happened next. At 2:21 a.m. the following night, the phone rang again. Same number, same blank caller ID, same lack of signal. I answered with trembling hands. 911, what's? The same breath, the same rattling cold, the same voice. But this time, he didn't ask for help. He whispered my name. I slammed the phone down. A minute later, it rang again. Same number. I didn't answer. It rang every night after that, always at 2:21 a.m. Always that same breath on the voicemail, growing slower, weaker, wetter, like something freezing and sinking deeper with each attempt to speak. The worst night was December 23rd. The voicemail was 9 seconds long, 7 seconds of silence. Then, barely audible, "Found you." I didn't sleep for days. I got a leave of absence from dispatch and stayed with my sister 2 towns over. I tried convincing myself it was lingering trauma from late shift stress, winter isolation, too much caffeine. But 2 nights later at her house, the landline rang. At 2:21 a.m., her caller ID showed unknown caller. She picked up before I could stop her. I heard nothing, no breathing, no voice, until she slowly lowered the phone, face pale. "What's wrong?" I whispered. She swallowed hard. He said someone is waiting for you near the water." My spine turned to ice. Her house is nowhere near a lake. No rivers, no ponds, nothing. Until that night. Because when I looked outside, past her porch, past the quiet street, I saw something impossible reflecting under the street lamp. Ice. A thin, spreading sheet of frozen water creeping across the pavement. Growing. Reaching toward her front door. I haven't heard the voice since. But every December I find thin patches of frost forming perfect circles under whichever window I sleep near. And sometimes, just before dawn, I hear it again. One faint, drowning breath. The first box showed up on the morning of December 4th. I almost tripped over it walking out onto the porch to get the newspaper. It sat dead center on the doormat, small, maybe 6 inches wide, wrapped in plain brown paper with a simple red string tied neatly across the top. No handwriting, no postage, no tape, just a perfectly wrapped little square like something from an old-fashioned holiday movie. I looked around the yard, no cars passing by, no footprints on the porch except mine. The snow was untouched besides a few fallen pine needles. I opened the door halfway and called into the house. "Mary, did you order something?" From the kitchen, she called back, "No, nothing." I crouched down and touched the box. It was cold but dry, as if it had been placed there only seconds before. Not damp like it should have been if it sat out all night. I picked it up and shook it gently. Something inside shifted, a faint clink, metallic. A part of me wondered if a neighbor had left a Christmas treat or a gift. Some people around here do anonymous December cheer things, dropping small gifts for no reason. But usually they tape a note. This one had nothing. I brought it inside, placed it on the dining table, and carefully pulled the string loose. The paper opened easily, like it hadn't been glued or taped at all. Inside the box was something I hadn't seen since I was 12 years old. My father's old pocket knife. The same one I lost the night he died. It had his initials GW, scratched into the side in the uneven way he carved everything. The blade had a small rusted nick in the middle from when he dropped it down the riverbank. There was no doubt this was his. My stomach tightened. I hadn't seen it in almost 20 years. "Is everything okay?" Mary asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I showed her the knife. She blinked slowly. "I thought that was lost in the fire." "So did I." We stared at the box for a long time. Neither of us wanted to say it out loud, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. I wrapped the knife in a rag and put it in the drawer beside the sink, telling myself someone must have found it all these years later, but the thought rang hollow. The next morning, there was another box. Same paper, same red string, same perfect placement on the doormat. This time, I didn't bring it inside. I opened it right there on the porch, fingers numb in the cold. Inside was an old photograph, my mother holding me on her lap, taken in front of the Christmas tree when I was maybe 5. The photo had scorch marks around the edges, the exact pattern left after the house fire that killed my father. My throat tightened. I whispered, "This isn't funny," even though no one was there. When I brought the photo inside, Mary stared at it in silence. "Maybe someone found an old box of your family's things," she suggested weakly. "No one knows about these," I said. "Not these items specifically. They were lost." The third box came the next day, and the next. Every morning, December 6th through the 11th, another identical package waited on the porch. Each contained something old, something deeply personal, something that never should have been found. My childhood report card, a birthday card my father wrote but never sent because he died 2 weeks before. A small wooden train I carved with him in the garage the winter before the fire. A melted pair of binoculars that I thought had burned completely. Every single item had been missing since the night the fire consumed half the house. By December 11th, the weight in my chest felt like a stone. The pattern was too deliberate, the items too intimate. Someone knew what they were doing. On December 12th, the boxes stopped. No package that morning, none the morning after. The silence should have brought relief, but instead it twisted into something worse. Anticipation, like waiting for a drop after a long climb. 2 days passed without any boxes, and though we tried to ignore it, neither of us slept well. I felt watched in my own home, as if someone was standing just outside the windows whenever we looked away. On the night of December 14th, things escalated. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:17 a.m. One single chime. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. Mary gasped softly beside me. "Don't answer it," she whispered. I nodded slowly. Another chime, soft, slow, deliberate. We stayed completely still. Then the third chime rang, drawn out, almost musical. And then silence. I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the hallway. From there, I could see the faint outline of the front door. Something slid softly across the porch, like someone dragging their fingers along the wood. Then footsteps, slow ones, walking away. I didn't move until I could no longer hear them. When dawn came, we opened the door. Another box waited on the mat. But unlike the others, this one wasn't wrapped in plain brown paper. This one was wrapped in what looked like old newsprint. Yellowed, brittle pages, torn from newspapers decades old. The ink was faded, but some words jumped out. Local man found dead in house fire. 12-year-old boy survives tragedy, cause of fire uncertain. My head spun. These were clippings about the fire that killed my father. Hands shaking, I pulled the paper apart. Inside the box was a photograph I had never seen. It was taken during the fire. In the foreground was my childhood home engulfed in orange flames, and in the background, standing at the tree line behind the house, was a tall figure, silhouetted, watching. Watching the fire, watching us, watching me. The figure had no face, no visible features, just a dark outline in the shape of a man. A cold shiver slid down my spine. "Mary, someone was there that night." "Who?" she whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know, but the certainty felt carved into bone. Whoever left these boxes had been at that fire. They'd collected the remnants, kept them, and now, for some reason, they were giving them back. I should have gone to the police then. I didn't. I convinced myself there had to be some explanation. Someone found these things in the ruins. Someone thought returning them was kind. That lie lasted one more day. On December 16th, I woke before dawn and looked out the front window. The box wasn't on the porch. It was on the windowsill, placed directly in front of my face. I stumbled backwards, heart in my throat. Mary ran to me, breath caught in her chest. "What is it?" I pointed, unable to speak. She approached the window slowly and froze. The box sat pressed against the glass, wrapped in red paper this time. Not brown, not old newsprint. Bright, clean red, like a Christmas gift. But there was no snow on top, no frost, meaning it had been placed there seconds before I woke. My hand shook as I opened the window. The box was warm, unnaturally warm, like it had been held tightly in someone's hands for a long time before being set down. Inside was only one item, a small, scorched piece of wood. It took me several seconds to realize what it was. The charred handle of the door that led into my father's workshop. The workshop where the fire had started. The piece was blackened smooth, but on one side, faintly burned into the wood, were 3 fingerprints. Long, thin prints. Not mine. Not my father's. I stared at them until my vision blurred. When I finally looked up, Mary was pale, watching me with wide eyes. "You're shaking," she whispered. "I don't think these things are being found," I said quietly. "I think they're being returned by whoever took them." Who would take them? The thought that had been hiding in my mind for days finally surfaced. Someone who was there that night. She stepped back. "You don't mean a person, you think it's..." I didn't let her finish. I didn't want to hear it. Over the next 2 days, more boxes arrived. One at night, one in the morning, one left on the back porch while I was showering. They were no longer old or familiar items. They were new, objects from our home. My watch, Mary's scarf, a pair of her earrings, my wallet. But the frightening part wasn't that the items were being taken. It was where they were found. Each box was placed somewhere closer to where we slept. On the coffee table, on the hallway floor, on the bedroom dresser. Someone or something was coming into the house while we slept. Mary slept on the couch on December 19th while I stayed awake with a baseball bat in hand, eyes glued to the door, refusing to blink. At 3:28 a.m., the temperature dropped sharply, blowing out the candle on the coffee table. A soft creak echoed from the porch. Then the doorknob turned. Once, twice, slow, deliberate, held. A moment later, something heavy pressed against the door. A long, slow scrape slid down the wood, like someone dragging their palm from top to bottom. Mary whimpered quietly. The pressure lifted, Footsteps retreated across the porch, then silence. When the sun rose, a box sat in the snow. Inside was a newspaper clipping. Not from decades ago, from that morning. It showed a photo of me and Mary taken from outside our living room window, hours earlier, sitting together in the dim glow of the lamp, looking terrified. The headline was blank. The date was correct. The article text was gone. Just the photo. The next morning, December 21st, was the final time I stepped outside before deciding we needed to leave for good. A box sat on the porch, but this one wasn't wrapped. It wasn't even closed. Inside, lying on a bed of soot, was a match, one single burnt match, and beneath it, a piece of paper with a handwritten message. 5 words. I never left the fire. We packed everything we could carry, left the house, and never returned. We moved 3 states away by New Year. The boxes stopped. But every December 4th, without fail, no matter where we live, a package appears outside our home, never wrapped, never tied with string, just a plain box. And inside is always something of mine or Mary's, something taken in the night, something placed gently in the box, still warm. The storm hit harder than the forecast predicted. Heavy, wet snow that clung to everything, bending the pine boughs so low they scraped the street. I had been watching it build from my window since sundown, the flakes drifting sideways like they were being pulled by something unseen. By midnight, the entire neighborhood had vanished beneath a curtain of white. Only the dim orange street lamps glowed through the blizzard, small islands of color swallowed by the night. My wife, Erin, was staying at her sister's for the weekend, so I was alone. Normally I didn't mind. I liked winter storms. I liked the quiet. But that night, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too still. Every sound inside seemed amplified. The furnace clicking, the fridge humming, the wind brushing the siding like fingertips. I tried to distract myself by flipping channels, but nothing stuck. Around 1:20 a.m. the power flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. The house dropped into darkness so fast I didn't even register the transition. I grabbed my phone flashlight and walked to the living room window. Outside, the storm was a white wall. The street lamp in front of our house pulsed weakly through it, barely visible. Then something moved in the glow. I froze. At first I thought it was just the snow blowing sideways. But no, the movement was deliberate, slow, heavy. A shape stepping into the faint halo of the street lamp, walking down the middle of the road. The figure was tall, long-coated, bareheaded despite the storm. I pressed closer to the window, trying to see more, but their face was shadowed by the storm's darkness. They stopped directly under the street lamp. Then they looked toward my house. I ducked instinctively, heart hammering, breath catching in my throat. I waited several seconds before peeking again. The figure was gone. The street lamp flickered again and went dark. The entire block was swallowed by blackness. I stood there for a long minute, pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, I forced myself to step away from the window and find a few candles. The house grew warmer with the small flames burning in the living room, but my nerves stayed tight. I kept glancing toward the window, expecting to see movement again. Around 2:10 a.m., things escalated. It started with a faint scraping sound on the front porch. Not the wind, not snow, a deliberate dragging, like someone slowly pulling something heavy across the boards. My skin prickled. I turned off my phone flashlight and stood perfectly still. The scraping continued, then stopped. Then a single, clear knock on the door. Not a pounding, not a frantic hammering, a knock, calm, polite. 3 taps in a row. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed not to answer. Something about that knock didn't feel human. I waited, frozen, counting the seconds. After what felt like forever, another knock came. Softer this time. Just 2 taps. The kind of knock someone uses when they already know you're awake. I backed away from the door and grabbed the heaviest thing I had in reach, a metal fireplace poker. I held it tight, listening. No more knocks followed. The storm howled outside. The walls creaked, but whoever was out there didn't try to break in. Eventually the sound faded, or maybe it blended into the storm. By 3 a.m., the house was icy cold, the furnace still dead. I bundled up on the couch, wrapped in blankets, convinced I wouldn't sleep. But exhaustion eventually pulled me under. I woke to silence, complete silence. The storm had stopped. A soft gray light filtered through the curtains. Morning. My phone said 7:42 a.m. The power was still out. I stood slowly and approached the front window. The world outside was buried in 3 feet of snow. The street lamp was leaning sideways, half bent from the weight of ice. I scanned the whiteness, looking for footprints or disturbances around the porch. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the snow. But not human ones. Human footprints show a heel, a toe, the curve of an arch. These tracks were long and slightly curved, almost like the shape of a bare foot, but stretched, distorted. Each print was nearly twice the length of mine and deeper than they should have been, as if something heavy made them, something tall. The prints led from the middle of the street straight to my porch, then back again. But the ones leaving the porch were spaced wider apart, like whatever it was moved faster on its return, or ran. I stepped outside cautiously, breath fogging instantly in the cold. On the porch, near the door, was something else. A handprint, pressed into the frost on the window, but not a normal handprint. The fingers were too long, curved oddly, the palm narrow and elongated. It looked like someone had dragged their icy hand down the glass, leaving streaks that melted slowly in the morning sun. I went back inside and locked the door. The police came an hour later. I didn't tell them everything. I told them I saw a person in the storm and heard knocking. They looked at the prints, exchanged glances, and told me they were distorted from drifting snow. "Storm makes shapes look weird," one of them said, though he didn't sound convinced. As they left, one officer paused and asked, "You home alone last night?" "Yes." He nodded but didn't smile. "Lock your doors tonight. Another system's coming in." That evening, the power returned. The house warmed. For the first time all day, I felt like maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the figure was just someone passing through. Maybe the prints were tricked by the wind. Maybe the knocking was... At 9:14 p.m., the porch light flickered, then went out. The furnace hummed louder, then cut off. The house plunged into darkness again. "No," I whispered. I grabbed the flashlight and walked to the window. The street lamp outside flickered violently in the night wind. Then I saw movement. A shape stepped into the light. Same height, same coat, same unnatural stillness. But this time, the figure tilted its head in a slow, unnatural arc, as if it were listening or sensing. It lifted one arm and pointed directly at my house. My throat closed. I stumbled back from the window and fumbled for my phone. No signal. A moment later, the front door rattled, not softly, this time violently, like something pushing against it, testing the lock, testing the wood. I backed into the living room, gripping the poker with slick, shaking hands. The door rattled again, harder, the frame groaning. Then abruptly it stopped. Slow footsteps moved across the porch, heavy, deliberate, crunching the last thin layer of ice. They didn't retreat down the steps. They walked sideways, across the boards, toward the window. A dark silhouette pressed against the curtain, tall enough to almost reach the top. And the voice, not loud, not angry, cold, whispered through the thin layer of glass, "Let me in. It's cold out here." My heart slammed against my ribs. The voice sounded wrong, not distorted by weather, but by something deeper. Like 2 tones overlapped. A human whisper blended with something lower, older. The silhouette moved. Something long and thin dragged across the window, making the glass squeal. A fingertip? A nail? I didn't want to know. "Let me in." The whisper came again, closer this time, pressed right against the window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He, or it, waited. Then slowly walked along the side of the house. The footsteps crunched in the snow, moving toward the back door. Then stopped. Silence hung in the air so long it felt like the world had paused. When the footsteps returned, they were faster, unsteady, not walking, running, straight past the house, toward the street. Then everything went still. The street lamp flickered once, twice, then went dark. I didn't sleep at all that night. When the morning finally came, the footprints circled the house completely. Multiple loops, some overlapping, some spaced far apart. In some places, the snow was kicked up violently, like something ran in erratic circles. In others, it was pressed down in perfect stillness, as if he had stood there for long, unmoving minutes, watching. The door frame had new scratches, thin, curved, almost rhythmic. Not claw marks, not knife marks, something else. I installed motion lights and cameras that afternoon. High-end equipment. I wasn't taking chances. But at 2:08 a.m. that night, the cameras all lost signal at once. Not cut off, not shattered, just offline, all of them. The motion lights went out too. I sat cold and shaking in the hallway, listening. No knock this time. No scraping. The house felt almost peaceful. But in the morning, when I checked the camera feeds, I found something worse than any sound. All 6 cameras had recorded identical footage during the blackout. Gray static, faint movement. Then, a single frame, clear as daylight. The figure standing so close to the lens, his face pressed against it. The skin was pale and cracked from cold, the eyes black and empty, the mouth open in a perfect, soundless O. And in each recording, the same whisper came through the static, distorted but unmistakable. You saw me. That was the last night I spent in that house. Erin and I moved out before New Year's. Sold the property at a loss. I didn't care. But every December since then, no matter where we live, no matter how many times we move, the power goes out around 2 a.m. The porch light flickers. And outside, somewhere near the street, heavy footsteps crunch slowly through the snow. The night of December 22nd was colder than any I'd felt in years. The kind of cold that settles into your bones and makes every breath sting. I work at a wildlife rehab center just outside town, and I was driving home from the late shift around 11:45 p.m. when I first saw the man in the woods. At the time, I thought it was just someone taking a shortcut, or maybe a stranded hiker from the nearby trail. The snow made everything hazy, but I could clearly see a figure standing between the trees, perfectly still, facing the road. My headlights caught on something pale beside him, a reflection, like ice. I slowed down, but didn't stop. Something about the way he stood, stiff and straight, unsettled me. He didn't wave, didn't move, just watched my car glide past, head slightly tilted. When I reached home, a small rental cabin at the edge of a field, I chalked it up to a late-night wanderer. Maybe someone lost. Maybe someone drunk. I didn't love the thought of someone lurking in the woods, but I didn't feel scared yet. That changed the next night. December 23rd. I should have been asleep by midnight, but around 12 to 17 a.m., my dog Harper started whining at the back door. Not growling, not barking, whining. Something she only does when she's terrified. Usually fireworks or thunder, but this time there was no noise at all outside. Just a heavy silence and the faint whistle of wind through snow-covered grass. I opened the curtain a sliver. The man was standing at the edge of my yard. Same posture, same stillness, same tilt of the head. Only now he was much closer. His shape looked wrong in the moonlight, elongated, maybe because of the shadows. He wore no coat, no hat, just a thin shirt and dark pants, clothes far too light for the freezing weather. I watched him for maybe 20 seconds, unsure if he even knew I was there. As my breath fogged the glass, Harper pressed herself against my leg and trembled. The man didn't move, didn't shift his weight, didn't blink. If he even had eyes visible beneath the hair frozen to his face. When I let the curtain fall, I waited and listened. Nothing. No crunch of snow. No retreating footprints. I peered again. He was gone. No tracks. Just empty, untouched snow. I barely slept. On Christmas Eve, the temperature dropped to -18. I remember because the radio repeated warnings about frostbite and dangerous wind chill every 5 minutes. I spent the day trying to distract myself, cleaning, watching mindless TV, trying not to open every curtain in the house every few seconds. By evening, the fear had dulled enough that I almost convinced myself I imagined the man, that the snow glare had played tricks on me. Until 1:03 a.m. The cabin shook with a loud thud against the back wall. Harper bolted upright, barking. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering in my throat, and crept toward the sound. Another thud, this one harder, like someone slamming their shoulder into the siding. I stepped onto the porch and shined my light around the side of the house. The beam caught something horrifying. A face pressed against the window, frozen pale skin, eyes wide and black in the glare. Lips cracked and pulled apart just enough to reveal teeth that looked blue from the cold. One hand was splayed across the glass, fingers long and thin, nails brittle and white. When my flashlight hit his eyes, he didn't flinch. He disappeared, not walked away, not fled, just vanished. The next morning, the window he pressed against was frosted on the inside, not the outside. And inside the frost, etched with unnatural precision, was the outline of that same long hand. The imprint was warm enough to melt slowly, leaving behind trickling lines that ran like tears. I'll never forget Harper's reaction that morning. She stood in the center of the living room, staring at the window, the fur along her spine raised. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just whined in long, pitiful breaths. I should have left then. I know that now, but I stayed. Christmas Day came with a weak gray sky, the kind where the sun barely rises at all. I spent most of the day on edge, calling friends but never telling them why I was really panicking. Everyone had their own plans. I didn't want to disturb their holidays. By 8 p.m. it was dark again. By 10, I was watching the windows constantly. At 11:42, the power went out. The sudden silence felt like a vacuum. Even the refrigerator's low hum vanished. The temperature dropped instantly, not gradually, like something had opened the door to a blizzard from the other side of the wall. My breath fogged white in seconds. Harper whimpered and ran under the table. Then, from deep inside the walls, I heard it. A faint tapping. Tap, 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 like someone walking with their fingernails gently touching the interior paneling. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound. The tapping moved slowly, circling the house, sliding across the walls like fingers brushing lightly along wood grain. Tap, tap, tap. Then it stopped near the bedroom. My chest tightened. I approached the door and placed my ear against it. Nothing. But when I pulled away, I froze. A line of frost had formed along the doorframe, thin, delicate, spreading from the floor upward like veins. The temperature dropped again. My teeth started chattering so violently I bit my tongue. Then I heard footsteps outside, bare footsteps, slow, crunching through deep snow. A shape passed the window, visible only as a ripple in the moonlight. Harper whimpered again. Then, someone exhaled outside the bedroom window, a long, slow breath that fogged the glass from the outside despite the sub-zero temperature. I stepped backward, stomach turning, then another breath, and another. 3 breaths, 3 fogged patches forming on the glass. Then something dragged its nail across the pane, a soft, shrill screech, the kind that makes your bones vibrate. "Go away," I whispered, though I knew whatever was out there couldn't hear reason. The screeching stopped, a pause, then a whisper that seeped through the glass like steam. "I'm cold." My flashlight shook in my hands. The whisper came again, softer this time. "Let me inside." I stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed my keys, threw a coat on, and clipped Harper's leash. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night or that outside was freezing enough to kill someone in minutes. I needed to leave. As I opened the back door, the cold hit me like a wall. The air burned my lungs instantly, but the yard was empty. No man, no footprints, no shadows. The night was silent. I got into the car, Harper shaking on the passenger seat. I turned the engine, and it miraculously started. The headlights illuminated the field, and my heart dropped. The man was standing in the center of it, not moving, not blinking, just facing the cabin. I floored the gas and sped down the road, glancing in the mirror only once. He didn't move. He just watched us leave. I stayed at my sister's for a week, returned only to collect my belongings. By then, the power had been restored. The landlord insisted everything was fine. The cold snap had caused the outages. Maybe I'd had a vivid nightmare, stress, imagination, but I knew better. There was one last thing. When I collected my things, I checked the bedroom window. The frost on the inside had melted, but the 3 handprints remained. 3 elongated, distorted prints pressed deep into the glass, so deep they warped the reflection. Fingerprints, but not human. I've moved since then, hundreds of miles away. But sometimes on the coldest winter nights, around 11:45 p.m. when the wind dies and everything goes still, I swear I see a shape at the edge of the woods. Tall, silent, watching, waiting for me to let him in.